Edwin K. Morris, and you are about to embark on the next Pioneer Knowledge Services Because You Need to Know, a digital resource for you to listen to folks share their experience and knowledge around the field of knowledge management and nonprofit work. If your company or organization would like to help us continue this mission and sponsor one of our shows, email byntk@pioneer-ks.org.
Hi, my name is Sue Hanley, and I am based in Bethesda, Maryland. Happy to talk to you today. I work in the field of internet and knowledge management. It's something I've been doing since the mid-90s, and I absolutely love what I do. It's a phenomenal area in which to specialize because the basic business problems are relatively persistent, but the pace of change of the technology and the unique aspects of each organization keep it a really fresh place in which to learn and engage and constantly have to stay on top of things. I really love that aspect of it. I could talk for hours about information architecture. I'm an information architect, but that's not what I'd love to talk about. If you really want me to talk for hours, you ask me about my granddaughter. And that I could go on forever about. I am inspired. What inspires me? Well, I'm inspired when I meet really interesting people solving the problems that I work on in interesting ways. I love learning from other people. It's why I love consulting so much. I always thought that when I started my career in consulting that I'd find a company and stay there, and that's where I'd make a career. And what I realize is I love the change that is involved in meeting new companies and learning new things and solving a problem again in a better way from learning each time. I get inspired by all of that, and I love all the opportunities to expand both my knowledge and my network by working in lots of different places.
So you're an introvert then?
I am actually. Socially, I'm an introvert in general, but if you get me talking about something I care about, like that, my granddaughter, or things, in my realm of expertise, I could do that forever and ever.
So are you setting up the granddaughter to be the next consultancy? Are you training her on what knowledge is and infrastructure and architecture?
Well, right now, yesterday we were working a little bit on our crochet skills. We were doing that. We were playing a very fun new game that had her in stitches. Yes, knowledge transfer and how to be successful in, I think it's called taco goat cheese pizza or something like that. But it was really adorable.
That's the game?
Yeah.
That's the game? Taco goat cheese pizza?
It's got 5 words in it. I'm not saying it correctly. Taco is one of them. Yes, it's a very hysterical card game. It's designed for 8 and up, but an almost 5-year-old can play it and roll on the floor laughing. So we were absolutely having the most enjoyable time.
That's awesome. What would you say is the most important thing to an organization at this time in our history?
Oh my gosh, that is way too big of a question for me.
Just like the top one thing. What would that be?
Well, I think right now, figuring out the balance of in-person and at-home work, managing the hybrid workplace is a pretty important topic to many organizations right now.
How are organizations, as you see it, how are they doing?
I think it really depends on the organization. Some, I think, are figuring this out. We're sort of still figuring out a lot of this as we go. So some are doing great, and others are learning that if you don't give people the work environment that they want, they will find another place to work.
Isn't that the truth? I mean, it really is a transitory, it's almost nomadic in the sense that, hey, you know what? I'm not happy here. And it's not about happiness either. It's just there's more to life than this one position or this one job. And a lot of people and it doesn't seem to be age specific. Would you agree?
I don't know. I actually see a very big difference between people in my generation and then the generation of my children who are much less associated to the company and willing to hop around and move more. I think we were more about staying at places longer and not hopping around because I think, I don't know, when did I start the working experience? Like in the 80s. I don't know that it was always super easy to instantly find alternative work. It seems like
at that point we were all stuck with whatever mode of transportation we had available to get to the next job. Now that's not even part of the metric.
And we definitely had to be in person because there was no other way to work. But I look at my children who are much more, maybe they looked at our generation and said, oh my God, they worked too hard. And maybe I don't want to do all of those things that the earlier generation did. I know in consulting, we just knocked ourselves out. The thing that I admire so much about the younger generation is they do have a much more healthy respect about work-life balance. My friends that are lawyers that are in my generation look at the younger associates going, and they just don't want that same lifestyle.
Yeah.
I was reading an article today about interns and residents in the medical profession unionizing so that we could stop this incredible not work-life balance that we ask our young doctors to have to live with. And so I think we have a lot to learn from that generation about managing all that. And I think it's a challenge that all organizations need to look at, whether it's managing the hybrid workforce or the hours in which we work and how we help people get a healthy balance out of life and give them long careers. Yeah, I think that's a big issue.
What's your prediction? And I know we talked a little bit about forecasting as far as what the future holds, but there seems to be some chatter about going to a 4-day work week. Is that going to happen?
For some companies, maybe. I think some companies have tried it and found it didn't work. And some companies are trying it and finding that maybe it can work in certain instances. I'm watching companies like Microsoft recently announced they're going to go to unlimited vacation.
Yeah, I saw that. Yeah,
that to me is on that same realm of 4-day work week. So
hyperboreal of flexibility in that the consumer, in this case, the worker who is kind of the consumer of the exchange here, is now setting the tone of how they interface.
I don't know how that works out. I've never been in an organization that offered unlimited vacation, but my understanding is that most people still don't take it. And that is a shame. So I think that comes down to role modeling and other things.
So we have to be looking at just a complete paradigm shift of corporate operations or organizational structures and how the interface of work is being done, because it's not long ago, and it's still a current thing, where the executive level that is no longer on the clock but always working or expected to always work, that has great benefits like 6-8 weeks of vacation that they can never take because they're just so important. So the organization punishes to a degree this heavy workload and there's no relief. So I can understand why the shift may just be a 180 from what has been to, hey, see ya, I'm going home. Let's talk about structures of organizations. Where do you find the best knowledge flow or knowledge handling? I'll just say in general, knowledge handling is being done. What industry is doing it well?
Well, I think a lot of sort of best practices in knowledge management came out of the industry in which I spent most of my career, which is consulting. Because when you think about it, what does a consulting firm do? We don't make anything. All we have is our people and what they know. And we bring that to bear on the problems that we solve for our clients. And each individual consultant has their area of expertise, but we are never as good as we are collectively. To be successful in consulting, we need to bring to bear the knowledge of the entire organization on every engagement. I need to bring all my colleagues in my briefcase when I visit, an organization, either virtually or in person. So I think that out of necessity, consulting has been extraordinarily focused on knowledge management and how we continuously leverage the knowledge that we have to deliver value for our clients.
So how do you translate that? And that's kind of been the secret sauce of success for consultancies, because they had to figure that out because, like you said, that's their product. That's their lifeblood.
Right.
And if they didn't figure out how to communicate, share, and develop knowledge across an enterprise, they were dead in the water. Then you had the onesie twosies that were like super rock stars that were always getting asked to go do a gig, but the rest of the organization suffered. Where does Microsoft fit into all that? As we've all seen in organizations, Microsoft has embedded themselves in more of an integrator, more so than just software as a service, as the old style would have said that. Where's the future of that going, where organizations can really start to better themselves by changing behaviors?
I guess there's kind of two things going on there. One is that Microsoft is bringing to bear an incredible rich collection of technologies. Some things that human beings assign value to, like adding metadata to things, but also a whole lot of AI, as a lot of the sort of the tech associated with artificial intelligence has improved so significantly. We can also take away sort of the grunt work of tagging from humans, let humans supplement AI to basically make it easier to deliver knowledge when and where people need it. So I think the tech is really advancing at a significant rate to take the crunching part of all of that out of the picture, and the tech to bring to you in the moment that you need it, the resources that exist in the organization, not just existing document assets, but also people who know about that topic. So not just sort of know how, but know who. And so bringing both people and content to bear is that's really Microsoft's sort of direction in the knowledge management space. That's really what's happening right now. But what they can't help you with, and what you as an organization have to do, is figure out how you are going to encourage and incent and expect people to contribute what they know. That's why consulting firms have been so successful in their knowledge management initiatives, because it is built into the culture of most consulting firms that you do get recognized and rewarded for bringing in new work. But that's not the only thing you need to do. You also need to leverage your own knowledge to make others more successful, because that's where, honestly, the profitability comes into play. As a senior member of the firm, you need to make sure that the junior members of the firm can be productive and successful, because they don't get paid as much and they don't bill out as much, but they need to be empowered with the knowledge and assets and resources that they need to both advance their career and do good work for the client. So a lot of this is about culture and recognition and reward systems to ensure that there is sort of built into the DNA of the organization this concept of knowledge sharing, both explicit and tacit knowledge sharing, things like responding to questions that pop up in your Q&A channel of choice. And so in the Microsoft landscape, that's going to be Yammer or Viva Engage. So you get asked a question by someone you probably don't even know. You understand that it is your job to answer that question if you know the answer. Or if you don't know the answer and you know who might know the answer, to tag that person, hey, you're it. Now you might know the answer to that question. No technology company can do that for you. That's your organization. So I can bring the technology to you, but I can't make you drink, if you will, unless you also have that culture built in, and sort of people feel that, yes, this is what I am expected to do. This is how I advance my career.
So who owns that behavior? And I ask this many times because it seems to be organizationally specific to, or even not even noted. So is it the chief knowledge officer, the CTO, the HR person? And I push this button because there's not enough people that consensus-wise agree to this. So what is your opinion of who owns the culture?
All of the above. And I think this is why the focus on the technology is about employee experience, not the individual silos in which each of those people that you just mentioned live. It's about partnering together to care about employee experience. I think HR might feel, to me, or if there's a chief knowledge officer, that partnership might need to exist more explicitly to make this happen. There are sort of forward-thinking, broad-thinking HR executives, but if HR is really focused transactionally, and as it is in many organizations, you won't have that visionary. I really should be thinking about the entire experience that my employees have, from onboarding to knowledge, learning and professional development, to contributions to the bottom line in the organization. And so I think at that point, we now need to partner with, if there is a chief knowledge officer or someone responsible for knowledge management, that cannot live outside the mandate of HR It has to be shared.
Do you see an organization or a type of organization that specifies culture to the point that is that intangible, and we'll call it an intangible? I mean, we know it's a tangible, but in the bigger sense, it's an intangible. If you don't put somebody that's responsible or the caretaker of that, how do you define it, and how do you enforce anything?
Well, the organization that I came out of, where I sort of got my start as the director of knowledge management, it became the most important project for the CEO.
Ooh.
And you know what? You want to make something happen, it's got to be something that the leadership team of the organization really cares about. And the reason I think we were very successful in what we did was because that is what he cared about. He really understood that knowledge leverage and being able to deliver more with less had a direct contribution to satisfaction of the employee. Hey, I feel like I have a network of people who can help me if I am struggling, or who have the same area of expertise that I do, who can advance what I am learning and can help me on a nuanced basis. It was built into the DNA of our culture, but led by the chief executive officer. And actually having the chief executive sponsor and promote and care about and model those behaviors is, to me, that's the ultimate way to demonstrate that this is important to the organization. And then gets delegated because then everybody believes it's their responsibility and we can work more collaboratively.
Well, sure. I mean, it's a cascade at that point, right? Everybody's got to have a piece. But if it's not explicit, if it's not a component, where would you put it in an organization?
Well, first of all, I want it to be explicit. It has to be in the big rocks of the organization. And if it's not in those high priority outcome goals, strategic objectives for the organization, I call that the do not pass go, do not collect $200 moment. Why bother? Because it means you're going to be challenged at every step of the way. It's like being number 11 on the top 10 things we're going to do this year, right? I mean, you're the sideshow. You want to be the main event. And so when I do consulting projects in knowledge management, I'm like, I need to see your 3 to 5. What are your strategic goals for the year? Because if we can't tie what we're doing to those strategic goals, no one's going to pay attention to us.
No.
Again, I think you need to stop and look at what the strategic objectives are and make sure that as you are describing why we're doing this, it's aligned to what's important in the organization.
Well, let's go back to the pain point of people not reusing money or resources already put into an organization for something they've already learned or experienced or experimented or what have you. How do we build in a lever to create a continued and sustainable element to the organization to constantly be researching their own stuff before they look outside their wall?
Well, it's interesting. I think that's also cultural as well and can be driven by the CEO and all the executives. So one of the things that Jack Walsh used to say when people brought an idea to him, and I'm not going to hold him up because he's very controversial in the management space, but let's just say that there were some good things that happened. Even if not everything was totally good, he used to basically ask people who brought new ideas to him at GE, like, where has this been tried before and with whom have you shared this? Buckman Labs, they were famous for doing that as well. So again, you have to value reuse as much as you do innovation in order to incent people to do that. So it's like taking some hints from hockey where you get credit for an assist. I mean, that's kind of what you're saying is you get credit if you contributed to something that gets reused and you get benefit from reusing. You get credit for reusing and then taking something to the next level, or just reusing and delivering that in a way that gives your client or the project or whatever you're working on, makes that more successful. I mean, there's no better way to get something done quicker and get back to your work-life balance than starting from something that already exists. I mean, it just feels like it's a virtuous cycle. And we need to emphasize that it is not a bad thing to reuse. In fact, it's a good thing. You don't always have to innovate something new, but you can also extend. And that's innovation as well.
I have to reflect back on something my father did as a small businessman. He had contracts that he would use carbon paper. Now, not everybody knows what carbon paper is, but back in the old days, they would have a piece of carbon paper to make a duplicate. And he would really try to get as many uses out of that one sheet of carbon paper, right? But the
Right.
point is as progress moved on and I became part of the organization, they make carbonless copies. I'm going to get our contracts made up on these carbonless copies. So I break the news to my dad. I said, hey, you don't have to worry about this carbon paper anymore, or, you can't do a contract because you don't have the carbon paper. And I said, it's already embedded right in the paper. You just press hard and it comes through. And he's just like, oh, grumble, 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 until he tried it. The point is, how do you establish value in reuse of information, knowledge, and data within an organization to hold it up as a shining light that you want everybody to do this first?
Well, I think part of it is built into your work processes. So if you have a project process, then the first step says, first thing you do is you go out and see what exists that we've already done related to what you're doing, on the assumption that, there's really nothing new under the sun. I'm sure we've done something related before. I'm working with a client right now where that is exactly their process. You cannot start a new project without looking to see what have we done in that area. And then from a tech perspective, our job is to make that easy for you to find, help find something similar. So
you don't want it to be here, go in this dark mine and see what you can find, and we'll not give you a candle at all.
So step one is you build that into the process.
Yeah.
And that's going to solve 90% of the problems, actually, is because the process says the first thing that we do is find out the know-how, what we've already done. And then the other thing we want to do is want to find out in the organization the know-who. So let's say our search is crappy or we don't find anything. One other thing we can do is find people, because people can direct you to content, can get you quicker to the right answer than even your search engine can. Because the person will say, oh, I understand what you're talking about. I have a really good example of where we solved that problem before. That may be really hard for search to understand that nuance.
Yeah.
And so this combination of being able to quickly find prior art, and people who know about that topic and who can direct you to do that, I think, so step one really is build it into the process and what we do. And then the other step two really is to ensure that people whose content and knowledge is reused get recognized for that. So that builds that virtuous cycle. I'll contribute more, I'll answer more questions because people value that. And it's good for me, good for them, everybody wins. And our work processes say that's just how we do things. We used to say at my company that, one of the things we loved about our people is they would break down a wall, even though there was a perfectly good door. And what we were trying to encourage people to do is open the darn door and then figure things out. So
now that's funny. So you're sitting at a bus stop and some young guy or gal sits next to you all dressed to the T's and looking pretty sporty, getting ready to go to work, got the briefcase and all that jazz, and you start a little chat, and they get the conversation going. The transportation's running late, and they say, wow, they start to understand you and your background. So they're like, do you have any advice to me as a brand new CEO of the small startup? What are you going to tell them?
Oh my gosh, that's really a hard thing. I guess if I'm a CEO of a startup, the first thing I'm going to say is I want to look inward and look at the behaviors that I'm modeling. So we started out by talking about some work-life balance things. If I want to make sure that people take their vacation and stay healthy and focus on those things, I have to model that behavior. Don't be the person who tells everybody else to do it and then doesn't do it themselves. One of the things I thought was so admirable, I have some senior level colleagues at Microsoft who are relatively young and took paternity leave. And I said, back in the day, my oldest child is 38 years old. And back in the day, I worked for a male manager who I would be in his office. A ding would go off on his computer and he had to go drive carpool for his kids because his wife worked 45 minutes away. He was the closest. He would go drive the carpool, get the kids home. They'd be with the nanny and then he'd come back to work if that was required of him. If you can model that behavior, it gives everyone else permission to do it. So when a senior Microsoft person takes their paternity leave, it gives the younger folk or the more junior people permission to do that. And that, I think, modeling that behavior is such an important part of being a good leader. If you work 100 hours, how do you expect other people to get their work?
You're also bringing this conscientious or conscious awareness of just your behaviors, period. You're primarily answering the question of how to model in a positive way, but it also serves just as good to be cognizant of your behavior in a negative way. As you said, if you're never going to take time off, how do you expect your people to do that? I was deployed in Iraq a couple of times, and when your leave came up, you took leave. It didn't matter if you didn't want to or not. Hey, you're out of here. Go. The war will continue. We'll be fine without you, kind of thing. I see it a lot, especially in nonprofit world, is that organizations seem to continually suck the life out of people because they're so dang important. Mm-hmm. Or it's an internal mindset to the individual. Oh my gosh, if I'm gone, who's going to bake the cookies or whatever? How do we break that mentality? How would you suggest getting around that?
Other than the leadership modeling the behavior, I don't have any brilliant ideas for that because I'm really pretty terrible about that. I'm an independent consultant, so I'm a party of one. And I always thought, oh God, it's going to be so good to be independent because if I wanted to do something during the day, like go play tennis or go shopping or whatever, I'm going to be able to do that. I've been doing this 17 years. I can count on less than one finger the number of times I have actually taken off during the day to do something other than work. In fact, it's almost worse. I work 7 days a week because I'm never away from the business because the business is me. So I'm a terrible person to ask. I was much better
always working.
When I was employed by a company. I did a much better job because, the other thing is that I was getting paid whether I was, I had a salary. And so it was a little bit different, but I was always sort of making up the hours because I've been in consulting for so long. But don't ask me that question. I'll let you know when I figure it out and I'm closer to retiring. So I'm not going to figure it out.
I've been self-employed, and it's funny how people's perceptions are that self-employed equals independently wealthy. And it's like, oh, you can do what you want. You're the boss. Oh, yeah. Mm-hmm. Yep, sure.
I do get the Employee of the Month parking space. I don't know about you.
And you get free coffee, too, I'm sure.
Yeah, but you have to make it. Yeah. That's the problem.
How do you define knowledge management, my friend?
Again, another really hard question. But for me, it's basically making sure that everyone has the right information at the right time in the right format when they need it. That's, sort of a definition. But I think knowledge management is also about the cycle of both creating and consuming and reusing assets, because knowledge management doesn't happen, as my friend Stan Garfield likes to say, until someone reuses something. Mm-hmm. In order to reuse something, that content has to be in a place and in a format where I can reuse it. And knowledge management really has to include all the people things, all the process things, all the culture things, and all of the technology things to make sure that I am able to do that and to benefit from that. And the entire outcome goal for that CAM program, initiative, or whatever you want to call it, has to be tied to the main event of the organization, because otherwise no one will pay attention. And so everything we do should be tied to what are we trying to accomplish as an organization. And then I think it is much easier to define knowledge management for our organization and then make it happen.
Knowledge has to be important, period. Bottom line, to an organization in any shape or form, and its ability to flow. I think that a lot of organizations get stifled in that effect because it's not part of their do-out. And it's not even a part of their value system, right? So it's got to be a value and a, as you say, tied to an objective. Because if it's not, then it's just paper flying in the wind.
It's impossible for knowledge not to be important in an organization. But you said something really important, is that oftentimes we put up these barriers to make it hard for it to flow. And I think a lot of knowledge management initiatives are figuring out how to remove the barriers, how to get the rocks out of the creek so that the water can flow. So one way is to bring knowledge to me in the flow of my work to keep that going. But the other is to remove the barriers to sharing. That means creating a culture that recognizes contributions. It gives you credit for when someone else reuses your contribution as much as it does to them if they do something new with it. I mean, everybody wins, but everybody in that equation needs to get recognition, giving credit for the assist and not just for the goal. And I think all of that.
Is it just too hard? Is that why nobody does that? Is it just too hard?
No, I don't think it's too hard at all.
An assist on the ice is pretty observable. You can see that. But if you're dealing with thoughts and things and data and information and somebody...
Yeah, I mean, so the metrics, the measurement of it is hard, but the concept is not.
Okay.
And so there are ways actually where we can count the assists. So let's sort of take it to the technology in which I spend all of my world. In Yammer, for example, you can look at someone's contribution and then the engagement level on that contribution. You can look at who posed the question, but you could also see who answered the question and whose questions got tagged as that was the best answer. So it's not like there aren't metrics against which we can evaluate that.
But you have to have participants in the pool for that to work.
Sure. So that means a culture that says we share, we don't, if someone posts a wrong answer, we don't ream them out or say, ooh, you're dumb. We encourage discourse. We encourage mistakes. We recognize that mistakes happen. In fact, we value them because that's how we learn. We do after action kind of things, even if that's not what we call them. Like all of those things. Yes, everything needs to be in place, but not necessarily all at once. You can baby step your way into all of this. And then one of the things I think we need to do is as we achieve successes, we have to promote the heck out of them and tell stories about those successes. So back in the day when I was the director of KM, we had a contest because we couldn't possibly know all the things that were going on. So we had a Knowledge in Action Award, and you submitted your story and you told how it was valued. You said, here's what I saved or delivered. No one made it up. You write the story. You say what the value proposition was. And then we had the CEO name awards. Here's the top 10 Knowledge in Action contributions this year. And he would tell those stories and then tell them repeatedly. It's like, oh, did you hear about this? And the stories that people contributed were spectacular. I mean, like really amazing things. We could have probably tracked them, although this was 25 years ago and we didn't have the tech to track them all or identify them. Now you could probably calculate some of that without having to ask people. But when you ask someone to tell you a story, it will usually be a lot richer than the metric itself. So you need to know where to go find the story. Then you ask someone to tell you that story. Anyways, I mean, then you get my story, my measure of value. When I give you permission to associate it with my name, now it's not this sort of made up, hypothetical scenario. It's a real story. Well, here's what happened on this project that Sue Hanley worked on, that kind of. And so I think that's what you need to do to promote those values, to really talk about them.
So you're talking about a couple other flavors here. You're talking about curation and marketing, right? So does a good knowledge manager have to have these facets already built in, or at least on the table?
Or have people they can work with that can help them promote them. So do I need to have super duper communication skills? No, but I need to know how important storytelling is in making sure that we build this virtuous cycle. So I need to go reach out to my comms colleagues who do know how to do that and have them help me write a better story or tell them.
Partnerships, I hear collaboration.
Well, and again, I mean, how does knowledge get transferred? It's actually transferred via story. So most people in the knowledge management space are inherently storytellers. So that's sort of part of our DNA. We wouldn't sort of love being in this space if storytelling wasn't sort of part of something that we love. People have been sitting around the fire telling stories for a long, long time. I think many people in the knowledge management space do understand the value of story. We need to partner with our comms colleagues maybe to get it out more effectively, but I think
polished up and distributed. Yeah. Well, thank you, Sue. It's been a blast.
My pleasure. It's been really fun.
You have just finished our latest Because You Need to Know, a public service of Pioneer Knowledge Services. Please join us on LinkedIn and find us at pioneer-ks.org. If your company or organization would like to help us continue this mission and sponsor one of our shows, email byntk@pioneer-ks.org.